the mask mandates lifted for transportation. And we flew down in masks. And when we came back to the airport last Saturday in the Bahamas, the airport in the Bahamas was still saying masks required. Like, oh, okay, well, it's unfortunate. And we, as I was ahead of you guys on the jetway, that's the word for it, right? The jetway is the walk. Yeah, on the jetway. And there was space between me and the people in front of me. So I was sort of all alone, like walking down the jetway. And there was a stewardess ahead of me without a mask on. And we haven't traveled much in the last 2 years, but we've traveled some, and I haven't seen anyone without a mask on a plane in forever. And the people, it looked like the people who were just disappearing around the corner in front of me, who I didn't get a good look at, still had their masks on. I hadn't taken them off. But as I got closer to her, I sort of did, like, can I take this off? And she just beamed. She was so happy. She said, yes, take it off. We were free. We could do this. And I was like, awesome. Like, you know, we got someone who's actually really enthusiastic about this. And on a different flight, we had someone who wasn't enthusiastic about it. And, you know, they made a point of saying, basically, don't judge. You know, you're allowed to judge when everyone has to wear them. But now that you don't have to wear them, don't judge. Everyone has their own decisions to make. Like, fine, I guess. But, I will say that I ran into, because I looked for it, this piece. That's wrong. Hold on, Zach. Don't do this yet. This piece, yes, now you can show, in Washington Post, the headline for which is Justice Department to appeal mask mandate ruling if CDC says it's needed. The department said it would defer to the CDC's assessment of health conditions before filing any appeal. So if I may have my screen back here, there's a line in this article that is, the abrupt end to the mandate left little time for airports, federal agencies such as the Transportation Security Administration, which was charged with enforcing the mandate, and transit systems to prepare. And my first response was, are you kidding me? Like, little time to prepare for the lifting of a mandate. People can just take off their masks and that's not so hard.
Stop mandating it.
Stop mandating it, right? That? And then, you know, a couple paragraphs into the piece, they're talking about signage. I'm like, okay, sure, they're going to have to change up the signage again. Like, first off, just invest in a bunch of removable stickers that say, you know, masks optional, just slap them on all the signs. But whatever, I'm glad I'm not in charge of this. But signage is kind of an issue, but seriously, that's the best argument they're coming up with. Well, but this happened so fast. But then, so we ended up with a layover in Dallas, and get off the plane in Dallas, and no one's wearing masks, of course, in the Dallas airport, but there's still all the signs are up. Still all the signs are up that say masks are mandatory, and no one's wearing masks because they don't have to, because the signs are out of date. And the happy thought that I had, which may be exactly why, you know, WAPO, on behalf of the Transportation Security Administration and airports and federal agencies and all, are concerned here, is that people walking around in open defiance of the signage, because they actually know that the signage is out of date, may make them more ash negative, may make them more likely to say, hey, you know what, actually, I don't need to comply. This isn't, compliance is last week's news. And now that I've seen what not compliance looks like, maybe I'm more likely to resist bad orders going forward.
Yeah, that is a kind of a happy thought. On the other hand, the whole point is we've got captured governance, right? What it wants us to do, I don't want us to do. Right? It's right. Up to something, and I don't want to comply. On the other hand, I don't want a world of people who are not compliant. I want us to have, you know, really high quality, light-handed regulation, no more than is necessary to accomplish the job, and done in a way that it is, you know, interferes as little as possible with freedoms of really any kind, to leave people as free to do what they would choose to do as possible, right? That's the ideal. Which means that at the point that you have a non-captured government, you don't want people instinctively thinking, whatever it wants me to do, I want to do the opposite. You want people thinking, oh, that makes sense.
I'm actually reminded, maybe summer of 2020, maybe a little later than that, I was in text conversation with a friend of ours from grad school who's been living in Sweden for a very long time. And at that point, a lot of people were like, what is Sweden doing? What is going on there? And then as it turns out, Sweden had an effective approach. And I asked our friend, like, what were they thinking? Like, it didn't, early on when the US and the rest of the weird world were putting really strict requirements in place for people, Sweden was doing quite the opposite. And it seemed really not what most people who have, at least like me, like a cartoon version of what Sweden might do in their head, seemed like the last thing I would have expected them to do. And she said, our friend Jen said, well, the people of Sweden, in her experience, actually really do have a good relationship with their government, because the government does not hand down dictates very often. And the government doesn't do that very often, such that the goodwill of the people is so intact that if they ever find that they have to, there will be, Jennifer's position was nearly 100% positive response. Like, okay, if the government is actually telling us now that we have to do this, then we should do this. But that's because they reserve it, that they don't act quickly, they don't act stupidly, and sure, there will be mistakes, but they err on the side of not imposing restrictions and lockdowns and such on people. They prefer that error, which preserves the goodwill of the people and the relationship between the people and the government, to the opposite error, which is what most of the rest of the weird world engaged in.
Yeah, it's sort of a second order value, right? That we think in terms of preventing disease or failing to prevent disease, or
right,
things like that. But there's this other question, which is the integrity of the system that is trying to protect you from disease. That is actually fundamental. Mm-hmm. And you ought to move very cautiously so as to not burn its credibility, which is what they've now done in multiple directions by flip-flopping on everything. As, frankly, people like us have embarrassed them into acknowledging things, or courts have forced them
right,
to lift, mandates they apparently did not have the authority to impose.
Yep.
But, if we can connect these two things, we've got an authoritarian force that wants to mandate all kinds of things it has no business mandating, and in many cases that, even somebody with a passing knowledge of the facts can tell don't make any sense, mm-hmm, right? A mask mandate. Well, if you mandated N95 masks, then maybe your mandate is about something epidemiological. But if your point is cover your mouth with a cloth or whatever, we now know that doesn't make any sense, right? Mm-hmm. Your mandate is not about epidemiology. It's about symbolism. So that's a horrifying abuse of authority. But we need something with authority, something mm-hmm, that actually gives a damn, yep, to frankly engage in the treaty making and the alteration of the processes that we have, in order that, our grandchildren can actually emerge onto a beach and not see a sea of flotsam, right? So the point is, the authority, it's not like the need for it has gone anywhere, but it's mm-hmm, just being used for all the wrong things.
Indeed.